knew that the thought of women having babies could literally break Congress? Welcome back to Beyond the Bill Number, the podcast where we untangle the legislative spaghetti so you don't have to. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Stephen, your friendly neighborhood policy nerd for hire. And today, Congress is feeling things deeply, emotionally, but about themselves.
Oh, that's right. This week's legislation isn't about the border, inflation, or even about AI taking over our jobs or your Spotify playlist. Nope, it's about parental leave for people in Congress.
Specifically, we're talking about House Resolution 23, which just happens to be April's IssueVoter Bill of the Month.
So before we get into it, let's put on our international lens and talk about parental leave. It's probably good for us to just talk about in the world what parental leave looks like, because I'm pretty sure most people who are listening or viewing this know that the US has absolutely abysmal parental leave.
Yes, it is. So I spoke to Claude a while ago. Claude, my best friend, who helps me with all sorts of things. And Claude gave me a table of all the countries that have really good parental leave. It basically listed a whole host of countries around the world in order of parental leave. And guess where the United States was in that list?
How many countries are there? The bottom of that list.
I don't know. On the list, it's absolutely the bottom. So it doesn't really matter how many countries, because it's always going to be at the bottom of any list. Yep. Because it has zero parental leave mandated at a federal level, of course, because individual states will have different things. But it is the only developed nation without federally mandated paid parental leave, according to Claude. So that's quite telling, really. But it's also interesting to look at the types of countries that do have really good parental leave. So I know that the UK is actually mid-table, so we're not too bad. In the United Kingdom, we have sort of 52 weeks parental leave for women, so 52 weeks maternity leave. We have just 2 weeks paternity leave, though, for men, which is a bit of a problem, really. But then recently they have introduced like a 37-week shared leave, so you can sort of share a portion of the maternity leave, which is what a lot of countries do as well. And then, of course, the other important element of this is what's the pay. So in most countries, just as in the UK, you don't necessarily get 100% of your pay when you're on leave. You generally get somewhere around about 80% or something. So, but it's still quite generous.
It's interesting because we, again, have been talking so much about states' rights and kind of this patchwork everywhere. And when you work at a business, if your business is outside of your state or in multiple states or something like that, they usually will give you benefits like maternity leave for the most required for all of the states that the company operates within. My policy that I get at work is actually much better than what the Colorado family leave policy dictates. And I receive that because I think it must just be too challenging or stressful for the company to kind of separate it out. But for Colorado, you can go on short-term disability for a little bit of it. You can do some stuff like that, but you're getting disability pays, which is a lower percentage of your normal pay. But at my company, if you're a birthing parent, you get 2 months of disability and 3 months of leave. And then if you're a non-birthing...
Disability pay, seriously.
Yes. Well, it's because, it is... You've never had a child come out of your body, but you got to heal a little while after that. But if you're a non-birthing parent at my company, you get 3 months full pay, and then you can have the 2 months of disability pay. But my company, if you're the birthing parent, will pay for that gap in whatever it is. So I think in Colorado, it might be like 60% of your pay is the disability pay metric. And so my company will pay that extra 40%.
I mean, just going back to looking at other countries around the world, obviously this idea of having some sort of patchwork is very American. It's hugely dysfunctional, particularly big companies that operate in multiple states. But all of the top countries in the world are Scandinavian, which probably isn't much of a surprise. Number one is Sweden. They have total leave of 480 days at 80% of salary. Norway gives you 46 weeks of leave. Finland, 367 weeks. Estonia has a whopping 605 days of sort of shared leave between the two parents there. Iceland's an interesting case. They have just 6 months for everybody. So both, as you turn, the birthing parent and the non-birthing parent get 6 months. So they're both going to have 6 months off. And interestingly, with things like that, you don't have to take them at the same time necessarily. So one parent from 6 months, then so you can get 12 months in total with at least one parent getting the time off. And there's a reason why this is important. Obviously, it's important for parents themselves who want to be able to take time off and spend time with their new baby and so on. But it's also important because of gender pay gap and the sort of the glass ceiling for women. Because the glass ceiling for women in terms of promotion and so on is largely made of babies. It's all about babies, really, as is the gender pay gap. So the gender pay gap is about women overall being paid less than men, not about women being paid less than men for the same job, but just overall, if you look at a company and you say how much do all the women earn, how much do all the men earn, and then you compare it, you'll find that men are earning more. But that is entirely due to the fact that women tend to take leave for sort of pregnancy, and they'll often turn down promotions. They'll stay at a lower level because they want to spend time with their kids, and they realize if they get a more high-powered job, they won't be able to do that, and the company sort of will be quite sort of hostile to that type of idea. So that sort of depresses women's career prospects, which means that they tend to earn less. And if you take out like the childbearing from the actual metrics and analyze the data, basically taking out childbearing women, then the gender pay gap disappears completely. It's entirely due to the fact that women have babies and they want to spend time with those babies. And in the countries that have a very small gender pay gap, it's because they have very generous allowances of leave. So it is the Scandinavian countries. Iceland is number one in the world for having virtually no gender pay gap, because they've aggressively legislated to allow women to have sort of equal rights, equal leave, lots of good nursery support and things for newborn babies, so that women feel that they can work, and they can work in high-powered jobs and still bring up their kids and spend time with their family and all that kind of thing as well. So it is really, really important. Otherwise, you are just wiping out half of your workforce, potentially, of the high-powered people who are going to make you a world leader if you're not letting women have these the sort of the more high-powered positions.
We were talking a little bit about J.D. Vance's desire for U.S. women to have more babies. And it is funny because it's so hard to have a kid here because there's just no support. And we were talking before we started recording about how expensive even daycare is here. And you were saying it's like a second mortgage payment. I would be curious to see how these different countries address adoption leave. At my company, they make the differentiation between a birthing and non-birthing parent. If you are adopting, to have kind of the same amount of leave and things like that. I don't know if that's called out anywhere, or even for Colorado family leave. I know we have something where my mom could get 12 weeks off for like grandma leave to help out. So it's interesting to see some things are kind of moving forward. They're trying to figure out some of these social safety nets and some of these ways that we can have community support for these kids.
It'd be interesting. I wonder whether JD does support parental leave, sort of central federal funding for such things and childcare and so on. I mean, maybe he does. Because if he's consistent in his ideas that he wants women to have more babies, then he should support these ideas.
Well, he supports them as long as there's not more taxes, right? Like,
yes,
the women should just find 4 of themselves and then we'll be fine. Yes. Okay, well, I feel like, let's get into this because I think this is actually a really interesting topic that we have, because today we're not talking about little me, just a normal civilian. We're actually talking about Congress and their parental leave, which is something that you don't hear a ton of Congress fighting about their own benefits, but it does come up from time to time, and it usually makes a lot of news because Congress has lots of breaks, people get upset about how much they're paid, and it is really interesting to see how their benefits differ from the rest of the U.S. Let's break down what we're actually talking about today, which is H.R. 23, and what does it propose?
Well, H.R. 23 would allow members of Congress who've just had a baby or whose spouses have just had a baby to designate another member to vote on their behalf for up to 12 weeks. So it's a form of proxy voting, and it's meant to let new parents balance diapers and democracy.
That seems pretty reasonable. But there was a plot twist, right? It broke Congress. The House literally shut down over this. Can you walk us through how something that is honestly seemingly wholesome and normal turned into a parliamentary chaos?
Well, it was pretty wild, really. And I mean, it went largely under the radar. Most people probably aren't aware of this, basically because there was so much other wild stuff going on at the time that no one really noticed. It is one of these things where a certain low-level wildness just sort of goes under the radar. So Speaker Mike Johnson was fiercely opposed to this resolution, saying that it raised constitutional red flags. And he argued that allowing proxy voting could create a slippery slope. And he wasn't alone, really. There was quite a lot of opposition to this bill, particularly on the Republican side. But then all of a sudden, bam, Republican Anna Paulina Luna, who is a Florida Republican, teamed up with Brittany Peterson, the Democrat from Colorado, to force the issue with what they call a discharge petition.
Which, by the way, is basically the congressional version of a Uno reverse card. It's when leadership doesn't want to bring up a bill for a vote, but the members can use a discharge position to yank it out of committee and force a vote anyways. And if they can get enough signatures, then it can go to a vote.
Yes, and they did. So Luna got over 200 Democrats, which you might expect, but also there were 11 Republicans who signed on, which is a huge bipartisan effort. Remember, these discharge petitions are quite rare because obviously the party that's in power, it's very unlikely that their people will sign up to this because it is an explicit vote against leadership, and obviously they don't want to appear that they're being disloyal. So when this one passed, it blew up the House floor operations, sort of the normal business of the House, really. So leadership scrambled to try and block the bill, and they played this procedural whack-a-mole with an unrelated votes on other topics to try and force Republicans to vote against this. But 8 Republicans joined Luna in a rebellion here, and they managed to defeat that operation as well, and the House ground to a halt.
Okay, so just to recap, while America's dealing with inflation, global instability, the cost of eggs is somehow still being an issue, Congress went into DEFCON 1 over whether members could vote on paternity leave. Cool.
Yes. And it gets even better, really. So after days of deadlock, while the House was just stalling, because remember, they couldn't actually convene the House, because if they had, then this group of rebels would be able to bring this resolution to a vote and pass it, and they were desperate that it didn't get passed. So in the end, they came to a compromise which didn't involve passing the resolution. So instead, this compromise was reviving this weird procedure from the 1800s, which is called vote pairing, also known as live-dead pairing.
That sounds a little morbid, but okay. What is vote pairing?
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Live dead. Luckily, you don't have to actually have a dead member of Congress to do this. So basically, it means if you're absent, you pair with somebody voting the opposite way who agrees not to vote. So your vote is then effectively cancelled out. It's like sort of legislative ghosting. So the vote doesn't count for anything, but it protects your absence from actually skewing the tally in the other way, the way that you wouldn't want.
Maybe they wanted to bring that back because you're like the dead from the lack of sleep when you're, in those first 3 months. Okay, so we've got vote pairing, proxy voting, discharge petitions. What is this? Political Magic the Gathering?
Oh, yeah, that's cool. I'd play that. So I tap 3 bipartisanship mana to cast procedural mayhem.
Nerd.
Well, yeah, so the compromise is reasonable, I suppose, and there is history for this live dead pairing. But one of the reasons why it's not used already is the erosion of any kind of rapport between the opposite sides in Congress. So how easy would it be for a Democrat to persuade a Republican to abstain on an important vote these days? So if there isn't somebody on their own side that they could persuade to do this, then obviously you wouldn't be able to do it. So there's no guarantee that this would actually work. And obviously once you're off, looking after your child, it's not like you can suddenly dash in if you can't find the right pairing.
Yeah, that is a large concern. And so this issue might not be resolved, but jokes aside, this raises some serious questions. Why did this bill strike such a nerve?
Well, it's personal, really. And I think that's why they got so exercised about it. It touches on how Congress views its own work-life balance. So supporters say this is just modernizing the workplace. Congress shouldn't be the last place in America without parental accommodations. And Luna, to her credit, made a strong point that if you want a younger, more representative Congress, you have to make the job doable for people with young families.
And on the flip side, opponents, mostly Speaker Johnson, but some others, argued that the proxy voting is a slippery slope and that it undermines the Constitution. And there's a fear that once you allow votes without physical presence, you're opening the door to all kinds of shenanigans that they really don't want.
Absolutely, yes. So this isn't the first time that we've had this debate either, really. So during COVID, we keep coming back to COVID, don't we? Proxy voting was allowed temporarily, and it was really, really controversial at the time. Johnson opposed it then, so he's staying consistent with his viewpoint point now. And it's probably worth discussing at this point what his issues are, as they do have some merit, really. So first up, you're pretty clued up about the Constitution and all that. So tell me, what does the Constitution say about proxy voting and parental leave?
I don't think anything at all.
Yes, exactly. Get all that expensive education your fantasy clearly paid off. They might be called the founding fathers, but the pressures of parenthood weren't really a big concern back then. Yeah. They didn't really envisage women playing any direct role in this great experiment, but they were very concerned with what constitutes a quorum. So back then, if you remember, travel was very difficult. As members came to these gatherings, they'd often be late, and the procedures could be delayed for weeks on end just because members couldn't get there. So this resulted in inclusion in the Constitution of this particular stricture. A majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do business, but a smaller number may adjourn from day to day and may be authorized to compel the attendance of absent members in such manner and under such penalties as each house may provide. So very important that you're not allowed to do business unless the chamber is quorate, it has the right number, and that quorum should be a majority, so you need at least half the people there. And very important that members can compel other members to appear, so that you can't block votes you don't like by just staying away, which is not considered to be fair, really.
Well, thank goodness that's not a possibility, because I could just see Congress devolving even more into the chaos if we allowed for that. Okay, so a majority of members need to be present for any debate to take place and for any votes. That obviously makes sense. And a small group can't sneakily pass legislation while other members are bogged down in some muddy New England tract or in some poopy diapers. But it doesn't really specify no proxies.
No, it doesn't, because that wasn't really a thing that they thought would be possible back then. But allowing proxy voting to contribute to that quorum would be a major step and raise a real sort of constitutional challenge, which is why this resolution explicitly states that proxy voting wouldn't be allowed to contribute to the quorum. Fun fact here, Congress is allowed to conduct business when it's inquorate, when they don't have the right number of people there. The constitutional provision only really kicks in if someone raises a challenge. So as long as everybody's fine with it, they can go ahead. So it's a very practical measure, really. It allows sort of boring procedural business to be conducted with small numbers when nothing controversial is going on. You don't have to wait to have actually everybody there to pass all the sort of the minutiae.
Like voting on adjournment dates and the like.
Yes, exactly. But there's a wider issue here, and this is what Mike Johnson really sort of focused on. The word Congress actually means coming together for discussion. That's the whole purpose of it, really. It's the whole purpose of all of these kinds of bodies around the world. You can't debate and come to a compromise if the people aren't there. And this is the main fear, that the remnants of any kind of sort of consensual politics would just disappear if Congress people weren't even showing up. Already, you have a minimum of debate in Congress. It's largely leadership decide what happens, and then everybody else votes the right way, right? That's how it's supposed to work when they're disciplined. That's not how it's supposed to work, though. It's supposed to be a forum for discussion, and you need the people there for that to actually happen.
To that point, that's what I feel like the bigger tension is here, is that Congress seems to be melting down more and more as the days and years go on over its own internal policies and other priorities. And, the amount of times that the government has almost shut down in the last 8 years is more than I think I remember my entire life. But who knows? Maybe I'm just more clued in now. But there's budget resolutions, and these really shape Trump's second agenda. And these types of things are just sitting there, not moving. And this type of proxy voting is not happening. And also, one other question I have is, how many people does Mike Johnson think are going to be having kids when Congress is all above the age of 60? I'm a little...
It's true. That is true. The whole point is we don't want them all to be over the age of 60, do we? We want younger people in there. Desperately need younger people in there. And this is the kind of thing you need to do that. But it's where the critics are really coming in hot on this. Those people who actually noticed it, of course. And they're saying, cool story about the paternity leave, but maybe, let's fix the whole of the country first before we worry about such things.
Yes. But, also at the same time, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the equity angle. Members of Congress who give birth and are caring for newborns are still representing hundreds of thousands of constituents, and it's important that, you know, they also can see the value in these types of policies so that we can get them in the rest of the country. If we don't make space for them to recover and parent, those districts also lose representation while they're out. So those members might have to sacrifice their health and families to vote and to better represent their people, and that's just not ideal.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there is a really strong argument for this, and one that you might say in this day and age should really trump the sort of the constitutional issues and so on. Because they, as we've said, they're not. It's not super unconstitutional to do this. They've been very careful to avoid those issues. So, fun fact too, of course, this bill even got a nod from President Trump, and so that tells you that the issue is loud enough to crack through the usual noise.
Okay, well, where do things stand now? I assume Congress is back up and running.
Yes, it is. But the discharge petition is still active, technically. So if a Democrat wanted to force a vote, they could. But obviously, because of the agreement, it would be unlikely to pass at this point. But for now, leadership does seem to have brokered this piece with the vote pairing agreement. We'll just have to see whether that works in practice and whether it holds. So it's TBD.
All right. So bottom line, H.R. 23 may not have passed, but it put Congress's priorities and its fractures on full display. And in doing so, it's kind of brought up a bigger question about what kind of legislative body we want, one rooted in tradition or one that's adapting to real life and kind of the realities of the life that we live in today.
Absolutely. Or hey, maybe, just maybe, all of these clever people in Congress could find a way to do both. I mean, it's not like the Constitution bans diaper bags in the House chamber.
I will say I would pay good money to see a hearing interrupted by a baby burp. Democracy in action.
Yes, well, I mean, it's happened in other chambers around the world where women sort of frustrated with the lack of rules have sort of racked up with babies in tow, babies in arms, really. And on that note, folks, if you want to learn more about HR 23, do check out the bill on BillTrack50.com, read the blog post, and look for the IssueVoter link for a great summary and arguments on both sides.
And as always, don't forget to subscribe, review, and send us your hot takes. Should Congress get parental leave? Is proxy voting the future, or maybe a step too far?
And until then, keep looking beyond the bill number.